everyone. Welcome to Feels Out Loud, brought to you by Becoming Together Therapy and Wellness. This is your host, Martini, along with host Becky McNattin. We are so glad to have you listening as we live and share stories of mental health.
Today, Tara, we're taking on a vulnerable and intense topic.
Yes, ma'am.
When disappointment hits us. And this is a very hard emotion to experience. Perhaps even hearing me say the word disappointment causes people to feel something in their bodies. Maybe, listeners, you immediately tensed up. Maybe you had a memory or image automatically pop into your mind. Maybe you started thinking about an area or relationship in your life right now that has caused disappointment for you. Maybe you want to immediately stop thinking about these things and even quit listening altogether. If so, I completely hear you.
Mm-hmm.
This is because disappointment is painful. We don't like pain. But as a show that is committed to discussing real life and real emotions to seek authentic mental wellness, we need to give space for the feelings that knock us over sometimes. So today, as we start the show, listeners, what are you disappointed by? A partner's lack of communication, a family member guilting you, a sibling who holds expectations of you but doesn't seem to respond with the same of themselves, a manager or boss who doesn't make time for your questions, feeling unseen in one-sided friendships, lack of emotional reciprocity in your connections, not having met expectations someone else set of you, a coworker not following through on their role in a project, kids who don't follow through on what you ask them to do. It could be any number of things. And I would guess that everyone has something that is disappointing them at this exact moment. Relational disappointment highlights the space between what we hope or long for in relationships and what others are offering. Sadness, betrayal, confusion, anger, all can result. And truly, when disappointment hits, it can hit us hard.
It does. Think about how growing up, everyone knew this, the universal saying of like, it's okay if my parents are mad at me. But when they say they're disappointed,
yes,
it is 100 times worse. Please don't be disappointed.
Right. And here to help us process through the concept of disappointment is therapist Amanda Sullivan. Thank you, Amanda, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome.
So happy to be here.
Tell us what you think of, Amanda, when you hear the word disappointment.
It was interesting as you were talking, Becky, because I started thinking of so many of the things that you listed and started having memories, like you reflected to our listeners, of times in my life where I have felt let down by people, that I have experienced hurt or pain in a relationship, often related to like my expectations not being met.
Yeah.
Often related to the other person's behavior, choices, actions, words, and feeling really hurt, and let down in the context of those relationships and another person's behavior.
Yeah. And Tara, why do you think disappointment is so painful for us to experience?
Oh my goodness. I think because it's that notion of either I've let someone down, right? You've let someone down, or the other way around, you're taking it as like how this person values our friendship or a relationship or whatever it is. And so it's very difficult to process that emotion of, can I sit with it and go, is it okay that I feel these feels? Or if you're the person who is disappointing, it's what can I do to fix that? Because it is easier, like I said, to have someone angry at you or for you to be angry at someone else.
Yeah.
Because we know that's a much easier emotion to deal with. But disappointment hits deeper. It's more, to me, speaks of the person's values and morals and who they are as a human and character.
Yeah. Well, it makes me think about, as you were talking, so many things in disappointment that we might be saying to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And you highlighted this just a second ago, Amanda. What are we telling ourselves about the disappointment? Did I expect too much? And I would guess that disappointment in part is hard for us to feel because we find ourselves longing for something that we aren't getting and then saying, did I look for too much in this relationship?
Right. Yeah.
Am I not worthy of receiving what I wish I would receive?
Yes.
And so did I not try hard enough? Kind of a
Right.
self-blame.
Yep.
Should I do more?
Exactly. The blame
Yeah,
part.
things that we start to think through ourselves. And we're going to get into all of that. Super interesting topic here. Right now, we're going to take a short commercial break, but stay tuned as we continue to talk through how to navigate when people and relationships disappoint us. Thank you for listening to Feels Out Loud. We'll be back in just a moment.
Express yourself. In a world full of strangers, you don't know that's right.
Welcome back to Feels Out Loud, brought to you by Becoming Together Therapy and Wellness. I'm Tara Martini, along with Becky McNattin. Let's dive right back into our discussion on disappointment.
Yeah. So people let us down. People
Yes.
hurt one another. And as human beings who make mistakes, we are going to make mistakes in relationships.
Mhm.
That means that we are going to cause disappointment to others, and we are going to experience disappointment from others. It can be a massive struggle to cope with the gaps between what we want from others and what we are receiving. People might be wondering, how do I acknowledge disappointment and what does it even mean to hold someone accountable?
Mhm.
And we are going to talk through all of that today. But as we dive in, I have a quote from psychologist Justin Rocho, who said, disappointment is part of life that comes up when your hopes or expectations aren't met. We all feel disappointment at times in our relationships and other people and in ourselves. It's not an easy feeling to sit with, but it is an unavoidable emotion. So, thoughts about this quote? Amanda, you start.
I totally agree. I think disappointment and hurt in relationships is inevitable.
That's
It's
a hard
inevitable.
pill to swallow, though.
It is. And like you said, we will feel disappointed in others and we will disappoint others. Both of those things are true. And in thinking about this quote, I started wondering a little bit just around, do we expect too much or too little, or that we won't feel hurt? Is that an expectation people are having in relationships that is leading to a huge discomfort when it comes to feeling disappointed, or a lack of knowing how to address disappointment?
Sure.
Right.
And what would you say, Tara?
I think going off of what Amanda said, I think it's that facet of, well, you need to avoid disappointment. Just avoid it because it's so difficult and it's uneasy. You feel uneasy sitting in it. But if we look at the reframe of, it is part of life, like the quote said, it is part of relationships, like Amanda said, and it's how do we then work through that?
Mhm.
And so that we're not so alarmed when it happens and thinking worst case scenario.
Right. And not doomsday about it, but the
Right.
idea that relationships are messy,
Mhm.
including relationships with ourselves.
Yeah.
Being humans messy.
And okay, so here we sit and the disappointment has happened. And I wanted to know, what do people do when others disappoint them? So over the last few weeks, I have completed my own little tiny research study.
Of course you have.
I have asked several humans of all ages, as young as 10 and all the way through adulthood. Some of these, you guys, are even our therapist coworkers who I
Mhm.
asked
Yep.
about this very topic. And I wanted people to be completely honest as I asked them, when people disappoint you, what do you do? And here's what I heard. I'm just going to read them through them, and then I want to hear your thoughts
Yep.
at the end. So here's what I heard, listeners. Well, if it comes to a task, I do whatever the person didn't do because someone has to finish it. I tell myself I can't count on them. I vent to other people about it. I might talk to the person, but people tend not to listen when they hear they've been disappointing to someone. I try harder to make up for what happens. I take responsibility for the other person disappointing me, and I fix it for them. I keep my distance. I put my guard up. I hide or run away. I don't like disappointment. I assess what they disappointed me for. I assess who they are to me, and does this relationship even matter? I get mad at myself for expecting something, especially if this is a pattern. I think about what role I play in it. I like control, and so I try to address how I can change the situation. I get pissed, someone said. I reframe the person and try to make the disappointment not as big of a deal. I tell myself they must be having a hard time. Someone else said, I think about whether the person has the ability to engage in the relationship and even recognize the rupture that occurred.
Mhm.
I do absolutely nothing because people disappointing you is what usually happens. I don't put myself in positions where I could be disappointed by people. When I can do something completely by myself, I do. I don't really expect anything from anyone. What are your thoughts,
Wow.
you two?
Well, I tend to look at lists like this and pull out themes. So I think this was a great list that kind of covered the spectrum of people's responses to disappointment. And in being a therapist who works a lot on trauma, I started to notice themes around stress responses and or defense mechanisms.
Okay.
So I really noticed that I think a lot of these responses fall into some of those categories of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn.
So true.
And
So
how,
true.
and how disappointment might be an emotion that activates maybe core wounds for us, which then
Sure.
in turn might activate a stress response for people. And oftentimes people have patterns related to those categories. And so my guess is that they fit into one of those in lots of situations in their life. And ultimately, I think all of these are self-protective in some way, which I think is
for
really,
sure.
really important
Yes.
to recognize
That's what I saw too.
that we're trying to protect ourselves from feeling hurt, from getting hurt again, from feeling let down, and to notice how that both serves and disserves us.
Yeah. What were your thoughts, Tara?
As they were being read, I was thinking to myself, wow, every single person can't help but bring their lived experience into it.
Mhm.
That these are such universal feelings, but looking at it every single time I thought, well, this person has brought in whatever, kind of creating a hypothesis of what got that person to make this response. And thinking that nothing just happens standalone,
Mm.
right? Their experience has brought them to the point where this, like Amanda said, this is where they're choosing. Am I going to fight? Am I going to leave? Am I going to freeze? And they're there for a reason.
Yeah.
So it's not just, oh, well, I tend to hide or run away. Okay. Well, no, it's why. What brought you to that point where
Yeah.
that's how you
Mhm.
react?
Well, and what was so interesting to me about this list is I think if people talked about what do you love from relationships or what do you think ought to happen in conflict, and people say things like we should share how we're feeling, we
Yep.
should
Mhm.
we should bring up what came up in the circumstance. And I loved people's honesty about this
Yes.
because the truth was there. I resonate with all of what they said, and I think there's this idea of how we ought to process with people, how we should share our emotions and voice our concerns. And then there's this reality that when we're hurt, we go to these default settings of
Yep.
protection, like you just said, Amanda, to be graceful to ourselves, that we can cognate something that we wish for. And even many of the people who answered these things are therapists who we work with. So people
Right.
who are
Right.
trained in the world of recognizing things in the relationships. And they're the ones who said things like, I try to fix it for the other person.
Right.
I run away. So maybe listeners out there also resonate with some of the things that were shared, which brings us to some steps that we came up with on what we can take, or what steps we can take, things we can do when we find ourselves hit with relational disappointment. And we came up with several different steps. The first, which was understand the disappointment and validate your emotions, which is hard.
Yes.
Sometimes we want to dismiss the experience altogether.
Mhm.
We want to ignore our emotions, distract ourselves, maybe even intellectualize the situation or blame ourselves that it occurred. We talk all the time on this show about giving space for the emotion. So we need to let disappointment speak for a little while.
We do. And it's the notion of how often we invalidate our own emotions. You and I
Yes.
talked about this on a recent episode. I found myself doing that a day or two ago. I think you had reached out about something like a life event, and my response was like, oh, it could totally be worse. It's fine. I'll be fine. And it's like, oh my gosh, like just feel your feels. It's okay to sit in the feels,
Yeah.
whatever it is, rather than to invalidate my own feelings and going, it's fine, it could be worse.
Yeah.
Well, no.
Yeah.
Just like when it comes to disappointment, it's okay to sit in it,
Yeah.
feel it, and go, well, how does this feel sitting in it? It's a very hard thing to do.
So, Amanda, how do you think people could do this for themselves? What actions could they take to validate and understand the experience?
Yeah, I think like Tara said, allowing yourself to first sit in the emotion and not be judgmental of the fact that you feel disappointed. So it's that act of acceptance. I think also giving yourself time and space to sit in the emotion and know that you don't have to immediately respond to someone who has disappointed you, and giving yourself time to be curious and ask yourself more about the disappointment.
Oh, I like
Lead with
that.
curiosity.
Almost like have a conversation with it.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. That could be through journaling. Some of the questions that I ask myself to be curious about the disappointment: is this a pattern in the relationship? Is the other person aware that they caused disappointment? Considering intention versus impact. Asking myself, when have I felt this way before in my life? Because that might speak to broader themes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And knowing, again, that's kind of this awareness of what our core wounds might be and asking ourselves if it has been activated. And I think it's really important to know that we don't get to choose our emotions,
Mm. Well said.
but we do
Very
get
good
to
point.
we do get to choose how we respond to the emotions. And so that gives us a lot of, I think, empowerment to make active choices about honoring the emotion and then deciding what actions we take as a result of the emotion.
That's so important.
I think you said so many amazing things there on this idea of the distress that comes up with disappointment. And truly the validation starts from the space of saying, I didn't necessarily choose to feel this way.
Right.
Mhm.
The emotion came. I
Yeah.
do have some choice in what I do right now
Mhm.
to be compassionate about the fact that I'm hurting.
How do I respond to it?
Mhm.
Yep.
And so that leads to feel the feels. Allow yourself to experience the emotions. This goes beyond validation by offering space to let them exist. And understanding the disappointment might lead to we feel sad or angry
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
betrayed.
Yeah.
Loss of trust. So trying to not suppress these or rationalize them made me think about grieving disappointment
Mm.
because I do think there is grief in that. And what would you say to that, Amanda?
I totally agree with you. And again, I think I spoke to this a little bit before, but give ourselves time to understand the emotion before we respond to it. So like you
Mm.
said, kind of
Mhm.
Pause.
you pause. And I have this analogy that I use a lot with clients of an iceberg and how oftentimes it's, our emotions are kind of like what we see when
Mhm.
we're if you're on a boat and you see an iceberg, you see what's visible of the iceberg, but you don't see what's underneath the water. And
For
so
sure.
taking the time to explore what are the aspects of the situation that maybe don't seem as obvious or that I can't see from the surface to understand it better. And like you said, is it that I feel betrayed? Is it activating a core wound? Is this a pattern of relationships in my life? Is it speaking to my boundaries and something maybe that I need to reflect on? But understanding what is it really about, because it might not be just about the situation in and of itself.
Well, it rarely is.
Yeah.
Well, that's a really good point, though, because it could be this pattern in your life, not even in that relationship.
Yeah.
When you
Right,
talk
like
about
Amanda said.
core wound, you're talking about these very deep needs
Yep.
that might be present for a person that show up in all sorts of relationships.
Correct.
And to understand that disappointment might be operationalizing here, it really is tied to this deeper
Yep.
thing.
Mhm.
And I think, you spoke to this a little bit before too, but I think working on not just in this situation, but in all uncomfortable emotions, increasing our capacity. And I know you guys talk about this on the show, but learning to tolerate discomfort and not
Yes.
knowing and not feeling like we need to fix uncomfortable emotions immediately.
Yeah.
How do we build tolerance for sitting in something that makes us feel like we want to like crawl out of our skin?
Yes.
Right. Well, it is so true because it's that gut reaction of I'm either going to invalidate it or I'm going to dismiss it.
Yeah.
Right. Or I'm going to fix it,
Yeah.
Mhm.
change it right away.
Yep.
And I think, Becky, you bring up the fact that you bring up grief and disappointment. I think rarely people put those two together, right? With
Mhm.
disappointment is grief.
Yeah.
It's what expectations did I have? And there's a loss there, right? And how do you sit with that? And also look at it like, I think grieving gets more empathy, right? When it's like, oh, you're grieving that. Oh, okay. Well, I can connect to that.
Yeah.
That's
Mhm.
a universal thing. How can I apply that to my disappointment and explore that feeling and sitting in
It's
it?
a really good point. Well, you said expectation there.
Yes.
And that is a fantastic transition to talking about expectations. That is the next step in this experience of disappointment. Think about expectations. And I have a quote that I wanted to share with you both. In order for someone to consistently let me down, I first needed to have held them up to an expectation they consistently weren't meeting. Yes, their behavior was the problem, but my expectations of them were the problem too. Blogger Haley McGee says this.
Wow.
And I had some varying thoughts on this quote, but what are your thoughts, Tara?
Yes. Oh my goodness. First of all, I think everybody has felt that. But never well, I think it's more unique to go, well, yes, their behavior was a problem, but my expectations of them were the problem too. Did I expect too much? Do they not have the capacity to meet that expectation, what obstacles are getting in the way of them meeting the expectation. I think it's usually just identified like, oh, there's this, they're not meeting my expectations. That's the problem. But that second piece is so important but what about my expectations? Were they fitting expectations to have for this person? Were they too high? Were they too low? Right? Sometimes you have the opposite issue.
And did the other person know our expectations?
Yes. Did we make it clear?
Did we make it clear what our
Yes.
expectations were? Yes.
Which is
I do not do that.
because we assume it's
Right.
unwritten.
I just
We
like them to
assume-
read my mind.
Yes.
I'd prefer not to have to put a boundary in place.
And you're not alone, girl. We all feel like that.
Well, and it's interesting. I had this experience recently too, where I did express a need to someone and then they did it. And then I still felt disappointed that I had to ask them for it. And it speaks to
Oh.
what you're saying is, and that's, me also working on like,
That's the core wound stuff.
totally.
Those are core needs of I want to be
Yes.
seen
Right.
in relationships without having to say how to be seen. I don't want to hand it to you.
Yes.
And that's where you bring up it's a beautiful example of how that operationalizes that you
Yes.
said. And to me, expectations need to reflect the reality of how someone acts. We might have feelings about that reality, but expectations need to reflect that reality. Sometimes adjusting our expectations to reflect that reality of how others treat us is a key aspect of responding to feeling disappointment or feeling let down in relationships. Setting realistic expectations of self and others is another aspect to this. But I would say things like, look at the evidence you see. You said it beautifully earlier, Amanda. Is this a pattern?
Right.
That would be, look at the evidence you
Yep.
see, consider the behavior or trait that you're interested in the other person changing, and then ask, how often do they do this? When have they demonstrated action steps toward change and sustained this over time?
Yeah.
If someone has promised you change, is the behavior self-driven or does it require reminders from you?
Right.
If someone has apologized to you, has the apology yielded changed behavior? What are your thoughts, Tara?
Well, that last part has that apology yielded change behavior. There's so much in that. We've talked about apologies before. There's so much that speaks to the action or change initiated by it. I also think, as Amanda pointed out with the pattern piece, is it we're disappointed, and then as a reaction, we still don't expect anything from the other person, but then we go, okay, maybe I need to lower my expectations and expect less of them. But how often we need to think about like, okay, wait a minute, that's me in a way fixing it for that person when still not holding them accountable,
Right.
because they're still disappointing in the same manner.
I think it's so challenging because I agree with what you guys are saying is that we don't all have the same relational, emotional, and communication capacity. And it doesn't mean that there still doesn't need to be accountability within our
Correct.
relationships.
Yep.
And it's really hard to figure out each relationship that you have with each person in your life is going to be different in that regard. And it's going to even ebb and flow based on things going on in both of your individual lives and experiences.
Right.
But I think too, you bring up, Amanda, such an incredible point that if everyone's honest, we've all felt this, where you set the expectation, you tell them, right? You identify it, they follow through with it. But honey bunny, we then are left going, well, I'm still not regulated because I told you what I needed you to do and you just did it. I shouldn't have to tell you.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it's also being okay with that.
Right.
Of, hey, I was clear and I stated my expectation. You did follow through with it and you met that expectation. Sitting in, I need to be at peace with that. How can I work to be more at peace with the fact that irritates me because I shouldn't have to tell?
Yeah. So I'm going to put you on the spot, Amanda.
Okay.
What is the difference between having high standards and having unrealistic expectations in a relationship?
Yeah, I love this question. And I sat with it for a bit. And I think it's a great discussion question. I think, are we expecting perfection from other people? Are we expecting that other people will never mess up, or that even when we do express a need, that there won't still be some messiness or growth or challenge in them meeting that expectation? Are we also expecting, this is something that I struggle with, expecting other people to show up the same way that I do?
Yeah.
Oh.
And really working hard to learn that that isn't necessarily reasonable, and
Yeah.
that people are going to show up differently than me. It doesn't mean that my way is better.
Is the yes.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
And this having high standards, if someone can't meet those, I'm just thinking about how that might mean that there's grief around this can't be a relationship either.
Right.
Totally.
If the expectations are unrealistic,
Yep.
sitting with, well, does that meet the standard that I have around what relationship is?
Yep.
And also, how is that relationship changing
Yeah.
in a way of, when I look at this question, I think we have a set of expectations for someone in a friendship, let's say. But life situations then can have it be where someone doesn't have the capacity to show up with that level of expectations that someone has set for us, where if it's good to have those high standards, but also recognizing, hey, is this a situation where the person truly typically can meet my expectations, but is this whatever is going on making it the person incapable of at
Mhm.
this time? They just don't have the capacity.
Mhm.
Right. And that is really our fourth step of reflect thoughtfully.
Mhm.
You're talking about sitting back, thinking about this. Don't rush to react. Be patient and kind with yourself in giving some time and space to ponder the relationship in general,
Mhm.
how this moment connects to the relationship in
Yep.
general. Assess even the kind of disappointment this is, as well as how intense it is. You were
Mhm.
talking there about, like, has this happened before?
Mhm.
How big of a deal is this
Right.
moment? Is this something that goes into the let it go
Mhm.
bucket of life?
Right.
Or is this a big deal? And I challenge listeners to ask yourself some questions. We've brought these up a little bit already in the show. Do I
Mhm.
share my needs clearly? Or do I expect someone else to know them? Okay, everybody, I do this.
Oh, honey, so do I.
Have I communicated what I need or am looking for? These are things when you're reflecting to ask yourself,
Mhm.
is this a pattern? Did they actually do something hurtful or was it my perception?
Oh, wow.
So,
Yeah.
Amanda, what are your thoughts about those questions that listeners could ponder?
I think those are great questions. They're actually questions that I ask myself a lot when I feel disappointed and I'm reflecting on relationships. Especially this last one, and you and I have had this conversation lots. Did they actually do something hurtful or was it my perception?
Mm-hmm.
And I think also reflecting on that we will need to give people are messy, they are flawed, they are human. And so at what point do we have to have grace for that? And I think a lot around this, do I expect someone else to know them? I think a lot of us do that.
Oh, yes.
And so I think that that's a really important one to reflect on. And I think also, like, does the engagement and the repair go both ways? And maybe that's me jumping ahead a little bit, but how is the other person in the relationship been engaged in trying to strengthen the relationship and communicate with me?
Yeah, well, that's a fantastic transition to
Yep.
step 5,
Yep.
which is decide if you want to express the disappointment to the other person. You don't have to, listener.
Mhm.
You do not have to. But if you decide you want to express the disappointment to the other person, this would be holding the person accountable to what has occurred
Mhm.
and how you feel about it. And how can we assess what options we have and how important it might be to address it, considering the intent. You just mentioned this, Tara, the intent or reason behind an action or lack of action. And let's think through some examples on this.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Being late to a get together because of bad weather versus being late to a get together because someone consistently doesn't plan for drive time. You might have disappointment if
Mhm.
someone is late to a
Yep.
get together, but you see it's snowing outside
Right.
Mhm.
versus this is a consistent pattern of showing up a half hour after you had planned to meet.
Mhm.
So what would you say about intent around what causes disappointment? What are your thoughts, Tara, about how intent might change how we feel disappointed?
Well, I think going back to the example of, if you look at it, was this person, is it coming from a space of, how we're viewing it is, there's no regard, right, for holding up their expectation or their
Mhm.
side of the expectation? Or is it something that was out of their control.
Mhm.
And I think often it is, and it's going back to the last section as well, or the last number 4, where it is the idea of um, it is not a bad thing to have to express what our needs are. It's also not a bad thing, going back to our current section, of voicing it when you are disappointed,
Mhm.
right? Where just because it was the weather or it was this pattern,
Mhm.
you don't need to ignore it,
Right.
right? You
Mhm.
can address it, because then you're showing I value the friendship or the
Right.
relationship
Right.
um, in order to fix it.
And as Amanda brought up a few minutes ago, this idea of what sort of reciprocity do you get? What kind of
Yes.
interaction do you get?
Yep.
And in my small research study, when I asked about disappointment, I also asked people, what does it mean to hold someone accountable?
Mm,
And they said, it means someone did something and you share with them, they missed the mark. It means I get to have an expectation of the relationship. It means sharing a personal boundary of what you will do if something continues. It means being completely honest, no sugarcoating, and telling someone how straight up how it is. It means you don't take excuses or BS apologies. And so to me, it's talking about themes, as you were
Mhm.
mentioning earlier, Amanda, this is relational accountability.
Mhm.
It is relational accountability important when it comes to disappointment? What would you say?
I would say it depends on the situation, but definitely.
mhm.
I have an example related to the whole being late thing that happened with a person in my life that I care about very deeply. And I decided to approach it and just be like, "Hey, what's going on? Like it feels like you're consistently late to
Mm,
things."
Mm,
And and I shared that for me, it makes it feel like my time isn't valued or
right.
important to them.
mm,
And we were able to have this conversation. And they were like, absolutely, that's not the case. Like, I very much value your time. It is my own process of struggle with executive functioning
Right.
challenges.
Right.
And we were able to talk about what that person was going to do moving forward to try to be more accountable to me and showing up on time. And they were able to share some strategies that they were going to try because they knew that it was important to me,
huh.
which was great. I think that
That's an
allowed.
amazing
Thank
example
you.
of
Yeah,
feeling disappointment.
yeah,
You made a choice, as we're saying, you don't have to make the choice, but
Right.
you made the choice to share
yeah.
the experience of disappointment. That person heard you
Yeah,
Mhm.
that was received well.
Yeah,
because sometimes part of why we don't share is we worry about
yep,
defensiveness or blaming, or we say that's not going to be worth it.
yep.
But then you were able to
Yeah,
solidly address a rupture.
yeah. And I think for me, it's like I want to be in relationships where I know that the other person cares about my feelings and my experiences and wants to understand that. And I also want to be that person for other people.
Mhm.
Sure.
And so there has
Yeah.
to be able to get to that point, there has to be some vulnerability in addressing relational accountability.
Yes. Well, and I think that piece of vulnerability, and a lot of people, their gut reaction may be like, ooh, I'm not going to address this. But I also think there's something to be said that's so important of, but by bringing this up and stating your disappointment, it also shares that you value this relationship and you care about the other person.
Totally.
Because by bringing it up, you're showing, I want this to be something we work on or for
Mhm.
you to work on. So I think it shows that you're very committed
Mhm.
to the relationship.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Well, and I think it strikes me so much. Both of you are saying we also we want the other people to do that for us.
Mhm.
We want, I think most of us in a relationship want other people to tell us
Yes.
their experience about how we're showing up. And so, of course, then we can't only have it one way.
Yeah.
We
We do
can't.
Right.
What?
we do have to say, well, then how do I participate in that if
Right.
that's what I would look for back from someone?
Yep.
And then this last step, set boundaries. We've done whole shows
Oh,
on
yeah.
boundaries here.
Mhm.
And so we could talk about this for a very long time. But boundaries as protection. These are not punishment, everyone. This isn't about a consequence, but a way for us to protect ourselves emotionally and psychologically. Um, and recognizing the reality of expectations, what we are seeing. Uh, Tara, why would you say it's important to set boundaries?
Well, I think it's so important to set boundaries in the fact of then that's going to help you get if you're looking at like results, not only is it going to help your well-being because you've expressed how you feel and you're actively making changes, but it's also going to help the other person too to meet those expectations, right? If you set a boundary and it's a clear boundary, it's that piece of I'm protecting myself, but I'm also helping that person, just like Amanda said at the end of your discussion with someone that you care about. It wasn't just, well, here's how I feel. Oh, here's how it was received. It was one more step of what boundaries or what expectations or what things, tangible things we can do, action steps to help you in that situation. And I think boundaries protect both people.
Yeah. And what a great example that you offered, because you didn't show up with your friend and say, I'm never getting together with you anymore if you're late.
Right.
So the boundary wasn't a clearly stated ultimatum. Your boundary was inquiring via a question of tell me what's going on.
Yeah.
And the undercurrent of that was I'm not okay with what's happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
So it looks more subtle than saying I'm not getting together if you're not on time anymore. But why would you say boundaries are important, Amanda?
I would reiterate a lot of what Tara said. I view boundaries as a way to make relationships stronger and for both people to get their needs met and feel understood by the other person. I think a lack of boundaries often leads to resentment and disappointment, which is
more disappointment. Yes.
So true.
And so I really view boundaries as helping to strengthen relationships. And I think when we can be vulnerable, it leads us to feeling more seen and heard in relationships, which helps us feel more connected to people, which is what we all want.
It is that connection piece. I also think it's a huge reframe, though, for just the universal concept of boundaries for people like you had stated, Becky, to view them not about punishing someone.
Yeah.
Right.
It isn't. It's not a bad thing. There's not a lot of times I think there's a negative connotation around boundaries. And if you really look at what it is, it's really nurturing and fostering a relationship and keeping that connection.
Now, when we're trying to protect ourselves against hurt, we might not want to share. This brings us back to what do you do when you get disappointed? The reality of it is we don't want someone to hurt us more. And so fear comes into play here. And some things that maybe you go back to step 4 on the reflecting thoughtfully, reflect on how the person receives your statements. If you've decided to express this, do they get defensive? Do they deny the problem? Do they rationalize their behavior? Do they seek change? Do they ask you questions about how it's received to you? Give it some time and see what happens after you've said something too. Nothing really changes in a second.
Right.
So give it some time. Sometimes emotions lessen and sometimes even time offers some perspective. But I would also say, and would love just a quick ending on, we need to consider ending relationships with people or places that disappoint you over and over and over again.
Yep.
Is this relationship replenishing energy or depleting it is my big question for people. And what would you say, Tara?
Oh my goodness. Just asking that question. Is this relationship replenishing my energy? And also, what am I gaining from it? Right? Because we both want to be gaining something from a relationship. Or is it depleting it? And is it consistently doing that? Right? It's different if there's a one-off somewhere. But it's examining it. And again, too, it's that reframe of ending relationships is not always a bad thing, right? People can come and represent a season in our life or a reason for them coming into it. It's also looking at accepting and being at peace with it's okay to end a relationship. It's not a failure.
Yeah. Your thoughts, Amanda?
I totally agree. I have a lot of the same thoughts that Tara does in terms of, yes, is this a consistent pattern in this relationship where I feel like I'm trying to engage in a way that the other person isn't capable of? And it's causing me more distress or impact on my emotional and mental wellness to continue to be in this relationship. And how much effort have I put into trying to repair if that's something that feels important to me?
That's a good point.
Yeah, what a beautiful reframe. To me, my takeaway from this is disappointment, although really hard to feel, can be a signal to us. It can serve as a beautiful tool, a hard tool, but a beautiful tool of recognition to pause, to reassess what is going on, and to think about ourselves and our relationships.
Mhm.
So much to think about here. This has been fascinating. We're headed to a commercial break, but when we come back, we're going to talk through questions from you all, our listeners. Feels Out Loud will process your thoughts in just a moment.
All you see is danger, trying to find what you lost. You can't go it alone. Express yourself.
We are back again with Feels Out Loud, and this part of the show is where we talk through questions from you all, our beautiful listeners. If you have a question related to mental wellness, sharing feelings, or topics for each week that you would like us to process through, please visit our website at becomingtogethermn.com and find the Feels Out Loud page to submit a question directly. Or feel free to email us at contact@becomingtogethermn.com. Of course, please follow us on social media. We really do want to hear from you and what you are wondering about.
And thank you, everyone who sent in thoughts, comments, questions about times when people disappoint you. These are big moments for folks. And our first listener asked us, you guys have talked about rupture and repair a lot. Yes, we have,
Yes, we
friends.
have.
Is it possible to turn a situation of disappointment into a deeper understanding of one another?
Mm.
What would you say needs to be present to be able to do this? And Amanda, what would you say to this listener?
I would say, yes, it's definitely possible to turn disappointment into a deeper understanding. And I think it can be incredibly valuable in relationships to do this. I think what needs to be present is a mutual desire to have this be part of the relationship with that person. They have to also be willing to engage in that work with you. And knowing that they are doing this because they care about the relationship and it feels important for them to be able to continue to engage and have their needs met versus withdrawing or disengaging. And again, really viewing it as a positive if people are coming to you in your life and trying to have these conversations with you, because it means that the relationship is really important to them.
What a beautiful reframe on that.
Yes.
Tara, what would you say about it?
I think one of the pieces, I think Amanda said a lot of it beautifully, in that are each of you willing to hold yourself accountable, right, for your part, to be responsible for your part of this, but then also looking at it from like a growth mindset. This is an opportunity to help us grow and strengthen our relationship, rather than, oh my gosh, we're going to address this and get into an argument about it. If we can have that reframe or that growth mindset, it's going to help going into it. But I think one, like Amanda said, both have to be willing to invest that, but then both have to be willing to, like, okay, what role did I play in this, and be okay holding ourselves accountable.
Yeah, I would add, my last thing would be active listening. Be a listener to yourself first. That's the 6 steps we've covered. And then if someone approaches you and talks about disappointment, listen to what they're saying. Our second listener said, what about disappointment in ourselves? How can we respond to times when this comes up for us? And listener, I want to just tease already that we decided we want to do a whole show on this, because I do think that it is such a big concept that we talked about relational disappointment, but what about this relationship with us? So I'm going to give Amanda the last word here on
Girl.
how can we respond to times when this comes up for us?
Well, I'm glad you guys are going to do another episode about it. That sounds great.
Yes.
I think very similar concept to before, compassion and curiosity. So having compassion.
Oh my gosh, the 2 words of our show.
Hi, I see a motif showing up.
We've tried to insert those 2 words every single week.
I don't listen to the show at all. I had no idea that those were important themes. So again, having compassion for ourselves and knowing that, like, we will feel disappointed in ourselves sometimes. And it does actually take a lot of courage to be able to recognize that.
Yeah.
And I think that we are able to grow as human beings for ourselves and for our relationships when we can recognize that we feel disappointed in ourselves, and knowing that we're not perfect and we're not supposed to be, and it's okay to be messy, and then to get curious about what caused the disappointment in ourselves.
Yeah.
And if you have a therapist, to reflect with them about that, to journal about it, to find a way to reflect on the experience and what you want to learn from it going forward.
Yeah, I think was so well said that really disappointment in ourselves. Rewind this episode and go back through all of the steps. We can use those same steps when assessing disappointment with us.
Yep.
We have a relationship with us. So think about how that shows up. And we're already at the end of our episode for today. Thank you for listening this morning, everyone. Join us next week as we talk through the connection between intuition, self-trust, and mental health. But in the week ahead, be kind to yourself. Remember that connection fosters wellness, and your voice is one that the world around you needs to hear. Share yourselves, friends.
Some do